The Occoquan Radio Podcast is a private production and is not affiliated with the town of Occoquan. Opinions expressed on the podcast are solely those of its host and guests. Hello, everyone, and welcome to the July 20th, 2025 episode of the Occoquan Radio Podcast. I'm your host, Ernie Porta, bringing you 10 to 15 minutes of irregular, unscheduled updates on things Occoquan and beyond. This episode will discuss some development updates in town, talk about a new invention marketed in Occoquan in our history segment, hear a critique of town naming conventions in the 19th century, and close by reviewing upcoming activities in town. Make sure you don't miss an episode by searching for us on the podcasting app of your choice and hitting the subscribe button. Thank you for listening, and I hope you enjoy this episode of the Occoquan Radio Podcast. I was traveling at the end of last week, and so I'm a little late with this week's episode. In our town business segment, I want to touch briefly on some development project updates. On the Mill at Occoquan project, the town approved the final site plan last August and is awaiting updates from the owner on asbestos removal from current structures and some applications necessary for approval of demolition. The owners of 406 Mackenzie Drive have submitted a subdivision application to divide the property into multiple parcels. Comments on the application were provided to the owners, and meetings with the town engineer were held in April and October of 2024, the latter when a revised version of the subdivision plan was submitted. Town staff met with the owner again in March of 2025 to go over requirements and is awaiting the submission of a new subdivision application for the updated subdivision plan. Last, on the Rivertown Overlook project, the developer has submitted as-built drawings, which are revised sets of technical drawings that reflect the actual construction of something, showing all modifications made during the building process that deviate from the original design. They've also submitted a boundary line adjustment. The town engineer reviewed and returned comments in April of 2025. Last week in our history segment, we talked about Elijah Janney and the troubles he experienced after his mill at 407 Mill Street succumbed to fire in 1809, viewing those troubles through various newspaper advertisements from the time. This episode will talk about another newspaper account referencing Occoquan 216 years ago. This one ran on today's date, July 20th, 1809. It was on that day that James Daniel of Dumfries addressed an announcement in the Alexandria Gazette to all millers. "I have invented," he begins, "a machine called a wheat rubber, from which I obtained a patent on the first day of this month. This machine," he continues, "may be seen in operation in the mill of Nathaniel Ellicott, Occoquan. Those millers who feel an interest in investigating its merit and have not an opportunity of visiting Occoquan may be fully informed by application to Mr. Ellicott by letter." Now, I couldn't really find elsewhere anything to describe exactly what a wheat rubber is and how it works. Records show that James Daniel was indeed granted a patent for the device on July 1, 1809, but no drawings or other application materials appeared to exist. According to the Directory of American Tool and Machinery Patents, quote, "little is known about this patent. There are no patent drawings available," end quote. This is likely due to the 1836 U.S. Patent Office fire. At the time, the Patent Office was located in Washington, D.C.'s Blodgett Hotel, an originally unfinished structure for which Congress authorized the purchase in 1810 to house both the U.S. Post Office and Patent Office. During the War of 1812, the superintendent of the Patent Office, Dr. William Thornton, who among other things designed the U.S. Capitol building, convinced British officers not to burn the building when they set fire to other government buildings in Washington, D.C. Unfortunately, many years later, in 1836, an accidental fire destroyed the office and what amounted to the entirety of U.S. patents. Almost 10,000 of them were lost. Eventually, close to 3,000 would be recovered by restoration or by getting duplicates where possible from the inventor. All patents from prior to the fire eventually became listed as X patents. James Daniel's patent is listed as U.S. Patent 1091X, and the best source for understanding what it does comes from Daniel's advertisement. In it, he writes, quote, "Practical millers know that in a great proportion of the wheat that comes to market, from the manner it is stacked in fields by the farmer and exposed to the weather, a number of sprouted and unsound grains mingle with the mass, and has eluded the ingenuity of the miller to separate it from the sound grain. They also know those unsound grains injure materially the taste and color of flour. My machine not only frees the wheat of stone, onion, cockle, dirt, etc., but does absolutely take it from it every unsound grain, from what cause soever it may have been injured, as my machine will not let any unsound wheat pass it. Millers may have their screen wire much finer than hitherto used, and thereby save considerably. It will also be found that the grain in passing the rubber is polished, and that even the eyes of the wheat is picked perfectly clean of dust or dirt." End quote. Daniil wrote also that his device is based entirely on new principles, that the cost of erecting it was a, quote, "trifle," end quote, the materials for it easily obtained, and the plan simple in the extreme. "Any workman of common capacity," he wrote, "will be able to erect it from description only." His price for using the rubber was $50 for each pair of wheat stones a mill contains, which would be about $1,300 today. According to an entry in the Thomas Jefferson Papers in the National Archives, James Daniil was a native Virginian who lived from 1765 until 1821, and for many years in the early 19th century operated a grist mill and manufacturing mill. Listen to our last podcast for a description of the difference between the two, on Quantico Creek, just outside of Dumfries. Daniil received 5 patents during his lifetime: kiln for drying grain in 1800, an improved threshing machine in 1804, a perpetual oven in 1806, our wheat rubber in 1809, and an instrument for mapping lands, etc. in 1820, which was the subject of his correspondence with Jefferson. Daniil apparently eventually lost both his mills at an auction for debt and died at his home near Dumfries in 1821. If anyone has more information on a wheat rubber, which was apparently used at Nathaniel Ellicott's mills in Occoquan, please feel free to share it with us. In the meantime, I encourage everyone who is interested in learning more about Occoquan history to visit Occoquan's Millhouse Museum and consider joining the Occoquan Historical Society. You can find more information at www.occoquanhistoricalsociety.org. That's the intro sound for our Rumor Mill Shredder segment. This is where we pay homage to the fact that while for much of its history Occoquan was a prosperous mill town, the only mill in operation today is the Rumor Mill. Here we take on urban legends, myths, rumors, misconceptions, or other similar topics that need straightening out. Now, regular listeners know I take great liberties with this section of the podcast, and today is no exception, for I plan to use it to discuss what I found to be a hilarious letter in the July 20th, 1822 edition of the National Intelligencer and Washington Express out of Washington, D.C. In the letter, an anonymous writer referring to themselves as Powhatan laments what he calls the American nomenclature of naming. "It seems to me," he begins, "that our countrymen have a genius for everything but the invention of names, and in that they certainly evince a striking deficiency." He goes on to note that emigrants from Europe keep assigning names of towns in England, Scotland, Ireland, France, and Germany to places in the U.S. according to their sympathies. Then, as their descendants move westward, they use the same names with the addition of the word new. There are, at his count, 152 post offices in 1822 with the prefix new, whatever, in operation, which also had the practical effect of confusing and otherwise messing up mail delivery in the country. Other officials, he claims, seek to highlight their knowledge of the classics by using names like Rome, Carthage, Athens, Palmyra, Hannibal, Scipio, etc., etc. What apparently set the writer off on this subject was a paragraph in a New York paper stating that the postmaster at Potsdam had informed the printer that all the mails south of Denmark, except those for Lisbon and Madrid, had been destroyed by a fire which occurred in the post office of Denmark. "I was at first shocked," he writes, "at this destruction of the correspondence of nearly all of Europe, but presently discovered that these high-sounding names meant 2 or 3 villages of New York." Could anything be more ridiculous, he asks, than all these naming practices? How much better, he continues, would it have been to have adopted the names given by the aborigines of the country, or have substituted the names of eminent men, patriots, statesmen, and soldiers of our country. To my ear, he writes, the names of Potomac, Occoquan, Tuscaloosa, and Ohio sound much better than Tiber or Danube. In upcoming events, we have a lot of stuff going on this Friday, July 25th in Occoquan, with the Christmas in July celebration taking place all day long. Local businesses will have a variety of activities, refreshments, holiday deals, and summer specials. And starting at 6:30 p.m., we'll hold our monthly trivia night in Rivermill Park, where the theme will be Trivia Takedown. Put together a group of up to 8 people and see if you can wrest the title from last month's winners, Mount Crushmore, who returned to form after a rather lengthy hiatus. For more information on these and other events in the town of Occoquan, go to www.visitoccoquanva.com. Again, that's www.visitoccoquanva.com. That brings us to the end of this episode of the Occoquan Radio Podcast. Make sure you don't miss an episode by searching for us on the podcasting app of your choice and hitting the subscribe button. I'm your host, Ernie Porta. Thank you for listening.